3, 2. Five, 4, 3, 2.
Hey, everybody, good night, or good after night, good evening, whatever the heck it is. This is Jeff Colson with Junior Hockey Advisor, Sunday night, ready to ask any questions you want, answer anything I can. We've got a topic to talk about. Sorry about the little head fake there. I forgot to get dressed. I forgot to put my jacket on, so I had to give you a little head fake there. So sorry about that. Yeah, I know. I see a couple of you already putting there's football on, the Bills are on. I get it. If you can possibly just give me an update every once in a while what the score is, but I'm going to keep rolling here, and hopefully you can multitask as you're doing this too. A couple things. If you can multitask, a couple things you could really do to help us out. If you haven't gone over, we're still trying to build our whole YouTube channel, getting the YouTube up and running. We're not so good at YouTube. Fantastic in other mediums. We're really, really strong on Facebook. Whatever you can do to help us with that, if you can go over and like and follow us on our YouTube channel, Junior Hockey Advisor, please do. Please do. You can always grab these videos and a ton of other videos. We do a lot of, I put out another video the other day. I'm going to put out another one tomorrow or Tuesday, just dealing with different subjects. So, go ahead. And if you're not part of our discussion group, jump on our Junior Hockey Advisor discussion group. I think you'll really enjoy that. And of course, right next to the Junior Hockey discussion is the Junior Hockey Advisor page. That's usually where we put our news sources first. And it's not really for as much discussion. And then sometimes the news sources actually migrate over into the discussion page, and we'll talk about some of the news over there too. So tonight, big topic coming up. We got a few things to talk about. Obviously, you're the most important thing. We'll get to any of the questions you have, but I try to start off with a subject or two or to give you some updated news on things. And then we kind of go from there and roll from there. So if you're okay with that, let's get this thing rolling. I think I'm not going to even try to jump into a bump. We'll just go live right now and keep going. Once again, still, like I think I told you guys last week, the ones that were on the program last week, new equipment, all new screens, new desk. The desk now moves up and down. I can roll it around to different angles to make the background different. Everything's on wheels. Everything's new LED lighting in the studio. So I'm pretty happy with everything, but some of the stuff on the board I'm still not used to yet. And I promise you I'll get better at it, but it's just probably not going to happen today. So anyway, the subject of what we wanted to talk about tonight, and I think you saw it with our little slide we put up for advertising the show tonight. The subject is the NCDC and talking about where the NCDC fits in. And, this is a good subject to touch on again because, we used to have 500 members and then we used to have 1,000. Well, we're up now pushing somewhere between 55, just on our discussion group, 5,500 right around in there. We got 5,000 on the other page and we've got 3,000 on the other page. We used to have a few hundred people total. So as we grow, we have to remember we have to go back and touch on some subjects and make sure that we educate new people as well as continue to add some spice and some more information for people that have been with us for a longer period of time. So that's why before we get going any further, let me tell you a little bit about who I am. I'm Jeff Colson. I've been doing this for over 35 years. I'm a master certified level 5 coach. I have worked for USA Hockey all the way up through the national camps. I've also taught at many of their different, or spoke at, or did some kind of presentations at many of their different level 3, level 4, and level 5 things over the years. I've been a college coach. I've been a junior coach, owner, general manager. I've coached at every single level. And I'm a University of Michigan grad. I have an MBA. So I've kind of migrated my actually it's my doctoral work from the University of Rochester was in education, and trying to take that and to move that into a little bit more of an education platform for parents and players and coaches in the hockey world. So that's where I come from. I do, full disclosure, I do work for a North American Hockey League team as a director of player development. And this is what I do. So, what else do I do? People from time to time use my chaos calls. They'll schedule with me to talk about their issues. I am not a family advisor, but you can call me up, spend an hour with me talking about, decision-making processes and where you're at in the whole, something might be confusing. You might be getting an offer coming in, something's going on. So that's me. And so let's get into the NCDC. This came up because of a question that was posted on one of our Facebook pages, our discussion group. And the question was basically, hey, I'm on the West Coast. I really don't know much about this NCDC thing. Can you fill me in? Can you tell me a little bit? And this question was to the group. And there's, of course, as usual, you guys do a great job of giving people really good information. The bandwidth is pretty tight on being informative and not crazy. Once in a while, but it's very rare we get somebody on the fringes. Most of the time, there's great information going to, and once in a while I'll jump on. I try not to jump on every day because really this is a group for discussion. This is not a group for me to go in and dictate how the conversation's going. But in this case, somebody had posted how they felt the NCDC fit in, where they fit into the world. And there's no right or wrong. The person's opinion is their opinion. I don't really care. It doesn't bother me. I'm trying to pull this up as we go to see if I can actually get it for you. But the bottom line is I responded with some facts, and I'm going to go through those facts with you and walk through it, and hopefully you'll have some questions. While I'm pulling this up, let's see who's on board here. Perry's on from Nassau. Good to see you, Perry. Rich is on from Potsdam. Man, oh man, it's got to be a little bit of snow up there right now. We got Danielle on from Colorado. Ginny's on from Kentucky. That's a new one. Welcome, Ginny. I'm not sure if you've been on before. Dan is on from Sheboygan, Wisconsin. If you don't know, it's the second best Sheboygan. There's the one in Michigan, which is God's country, or close to God's country. It's up in that area. And then we've got Dan over there, and real close, real tight race there for God's country. Richard's on from Long Island. Good to see you, Richard. I saw your comments today. Thank you. We'll get to the next one on there. Richard's going to also give us some updates on the Bills. He says he's muting the football. Thank you. James is on from Texas. James, you got to be a little bit more concise on that or precise on that. What part of Texas you're on? Like Kyle. Kyle says he's coming from Frisco, Texas. We got Kristen in Oceanside. And then Boca's on. Dan's on from Springfield. Boy, we got a big group on tonight. This might be, and it is. It's going to be a really good night tonight as far as the size of the group. Okay, so the comments I made as I'm trying to still pull them up are not going to be that hard to do. I can get to the comments. So basically, the bottom line is I gave them some facts, and I just broke it down into what I know. And most of I do this all the time. I do it for clients. I do it for organizations and groups that want to know how things work. So, it's not like these numbers I'm just fabricating or making up, but I responded with, here it is. Okay, I said, before we ordained the NCDC as being on par, and this is being on par with the other Tier 2 organizations. And the assumption is Tier 2 meaning the NAL, but I kind of took it as Tier 2 being Junior A in Canada too. I said, let's compare. First, there's good hockey in the NCDC, and I fully believe there is good hockey in the NCDC. There's the Boston Junior Bruins, there's the Hitmen, and then there's always one or two other programs that are strong. But it's a 13-team league, and not every team is extremely strong in the league. And in fact, we're going to go through that a little bit and talk about which teams comparatively, how does that stack up against the other leagues and where they fit in. So as we look through this, there we go. Now it's working. Okay. Um, I brought up the point that the Hitmen had actually done very well against the National Development Program a few years ago, played a 1-goal game, and nobody in the USA Hockey, nobody outside of the Hitmen, thought they were going to, or the people that were in the league. And that was right when the NCDC was transitioning from the EJHL. And most of you know that I was one of the owners in the EJHL. That league was a totally different monster than what the NCDC has become, by amount of commitments, by amount of NHL exposure, and draft picks coming out of it. It's not the same, anywhere near the same anymore. So anyway, the league compared to a top of the few producers, the NCDC had 23, or currently has 23 NCAA Division I commits. That's 1.7 commits per team. Okay, so it's a very small league, and there's 23 total kids. And we're going to get back to that number 23 in a little bit, but let's compare that to some of the other leagues. The North American Hockey League has 147 commitments playing in the league right now, which averages 5 commits per team. So 1.7 versus 5. The BCHL has 154 commitments playing right now, and that works out. And 7 of the teams have over 10 committed players in that league, and that league currently averages 7 or 8 commits per team. 8 commits per team. Okay. Now we're not going to talk about the USHL, which the number is actually higher than that. And the only reason we're not going to talk about that is because I just wanted to keep it, straight up numbers that we're comparing apples to apples on what is considered tier 2. Now remember, the NCDC is a self-promoted, they've promoted themselves and designated themselves as a tier 2 league. That no governing body gave them that designation. There's never been a vote. There's nobody that's done that except for them saying we're tier 2 and saying we're going to be a tuition-free league, which, by the way, is great. There's nothing wrong with that, and there's competitive hockey there. Let's not try to make this sound like the NCDC doesn't have value, nor does it have good players and good teams. They do, but I'm just trying to give you an idea where it fits in the pecking order of the big picture. Once again, the BCHL with their 8 commits per team. Now, the another one of the teams in that the BCHL is right next to, or one of the leagues, I should say, is the AJHL. AJHL is the Alberta Junior Hockey League, and there's 16 teams in that league. They have 44 commits, and currently they average 2.75 commits per team. Okay, so they're pushing 3, NCDC's pushing 2, BCHL's at 8, North American Hockey League's at 5. That means that's the average amount of commitments per team. Let's go back and look at those 23 commitments that are in the NCDC right now. 18 of those 23, 18 players of those 23 committed elsewhere before they got in the league. Some at U14. Yes, going all the way back to 2016, there's a guy in the league that committed in 2016. They've got players that have committed from 2016 all the way up to before the league, before this season. Now, I use main camp dates, July 1st as the cutoff, because it never really stops. There's never really a clock when you look at commitments. But this way, at least you got an idea of what the time frame is. So I judged everybody in this from July 1st till now. That's kind of from main camp through the transition into the regular season all the way up to now. So, fresh commits in that league, 6, but 1 isn't really a fresh commit when you look at it, because the kid really has only played 3 games in the league. So, of the 6 that are there, really the number is 5. Fresh commit means you came into the league without a commitment and you picked the commitment up since you've been in that league. That's a fresh commit. Okay. So when we're talking those numbers above about how many players they have, that's total players that could have had the commitment, for a very long time. 144 inside the North American Hockey League. And we have 23 of those players in the NCDC. So now if you go down and look at that list of commitments a little bit further, 8 of those commitments of those 23 were supposed to start this year. They were pegged on their commitment date, and you can look all this information up. You can either go to Elite Prospects or you can go on to College Hockey Inc. and look that up. And remember, there's sort features when you go to College Hockey Inc. You can sort it by junior team they currently play for. You can sort it by the date that they actually made their commitment. You can sort it by the college that they're playing for. There's a lot of ways you can actually sort that information. So it makes it kind of fun to look at it for some different perspectives. But, 8 of those kids were supposed to go to college this year. Now, some of that's pandemic related. Maybe they got pushed back a year. But when you see 8 kids before the pandemic, if I saw 8 kids that were committed to start the year that we're in right now, that usually means that the commitment fell through for some reason. That's past. Pandemic, you got to give them a little bit of a benefit of the doubt that, maybe everything's just pushed back a little bit. But I'd be hard pressed to say that some of these kids that started off with a commitment from U14, U15, U16, and started out and got a couple games in the USHL, got a couple games in the BC or the NOL, and then went to the NCDC. I'm not sure they're tracking, upward in their trajectory right now. I would assume that those are the kids that have lost their commitment in some way, and that happens a lot more than you think. That's not uncommon. It doesn't mean those players are going to play college hockey somewhere. It probably just means they're just not going to play at that school that they committed to. And most likely they'll end up being D3 players. So now let's just talk about that fresh commitment number. BCHL 42, NOL 41. That means from July 1st till now, till today. The BCHL and NOL basically, battling out 42, 41. The AJ 20, the OJ 9, the NCD 6. Okay, that's if you came in the league and you didn't have any kind of college commitment, 6 players in their whole league. That means 0.46 is what it actually works out to be. 0.46 players on average per team get committed to an NCAA school this far into the year right now. And you compare that to the BC, which is at 2.6 players, the NOL, which is at 1.41, AJ's at 1.25, and the OJ's at 0.7. So anytime anybody says the NCDC is just like the NOL or just like the BCHL or is better than the OJ or better than the AJ, all you have to do is look at the numbers or send them to the numbers because statistically that doesn't fare out. Now, stats are one thing. So what would I do next if I were having this discussion with some people that are looking to go forward? Now, once again, I'm not a family advisor. I don't know how a family advisor has this conversation. I think I do. But the next thing I would do is say, okay, let's look at some of the other framework issues. Attendance. Let's just go over attendance, not of fans, but of scouts, college scouts, NHL scouts. Go to an AJ event, showcase. Hundreds. Division I, NHL. Go to a NOL event, one of their showcases, their Top Gun, I'm not sure, Young Gun, Top Gun, whatever they're calling that event. For new players, their All-Star game, or for the younger players for the All-Star game, or uncommitted players for the All-Star game. Just tons. The number's well over 100, 150 at each one of these events. Go to a BCHL event like this. These events are just chock full of people. Now, I haven't been to the the NCDC event this year. I normally go every year. I don't think it changed this year. And maybe the pandemic did change it, but we're talking about a fraction of the number of coaches. Now, some of the coaches don't sign in. We all know that, but I can't imagine that there's 80 or 90 coaches that choose not to sign in at the NCDC event for whatever reason when they always sign in at the other events. So, and you do get more of a drop-in coach at the NCDC event because it's in the Boston area, and you've got a lot of Boston colleges. So you got a lot of D3 coaches, D1 coaches that'll pop in, watch a game, and pop out. And maybe it's much more casual for them, so maybe they don't sign in and out. But you don't see them that much. They're not up in the break room where the other coaches, they're not socializing in much. They might, it's the drive to work or drive home from the office kind of stop in where they got done with practice, they got a game the next night, they're going to stop in and watch a game or two, and then they just leave, get a cup of coffee and leave. So that does happen too. The other issue I talk about is, the ability issue came up in the conversation, but one set of billeting is pretty systematic. background checks, pretty much a rigid pay structure, and that is anybody inside of the Hockey Canada or the USA Hockey system. You know, between the safe sport, between the background checks, between the governance of how billets can be handled, there's a lot more oversight on it, and the price is much more regulated. When you get into the NCDC, you know, that can change drastically. The hockey house mentality is in a few markets where, you know, there's numerous hockey players unsupervised, meaning they could be 18, 19, 20, 21 years old living in the house. And that's not a knock. Some kids love that, you know, the dorm feel, the prep school feel, the college hockey feel. But you just don't see that in the other leagues. You just don't see the 8 or 10 players living in one house mentality. So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover and make sure that was going on, or what's going on in my head, to kind of explain this and to give you a little bit of background on this. Remember, this is not a bad league. The Hitmen can play with anybody. The Boston Junior Bruins can play with anybody. But when the whole league is only dealing with 6 to 10 new commits a year, that's about average. I think one year they had 12. Yeah, they'll get other kids that have committed elsewhere. If I committed locally and I choose to play locally because I've got my commitment in hand, I might not have to go out west and play in the USHL or play in the BCHL or play in the NAL. So you do get a couple of those kids. There's always a couple, and they're going to BC, BU, they're going to Providence, they're going to good schools, and they're going to good hockey teams. That's not the norm. That's the few rare exceptions. You know. So now let's debunk another myth while we're discussing this, because the conversation last year was around, you know, and you heard the big war cry from the NCDC followers. Look at all the NHL exposure we had last year. Look at all the NHL draft picks we had. Well, be careful with that. If you look at every one of those, every single one of them, I think there was 5 to 7 kids, and a few of them are still in the league. Those are COVID babies. Those are wandering souls that had no place to play because they're prep school. They were at Salisbury. They were at Choate. They were at numerous schools. These were already highly touted players that were BCHL, USHL bound players that they're finishing up their prep year. Prep school hockey shut down last year completely, and a few of them, you know, and masterful from the NCDC. Good for them. They jumped hard on it. The NCDC, more so than any other league, jumped hard on these kids and say, "We got a home for you. You can come play with us." And so they were able to jump in and play on a real modified basis. Some of the players played a few games. Some of them played, you know, 30 games. But those players that were NHL quality players that eventually became drafted weren't in that league because they wanted to be in that league. They were in that league because they had nowhere else to skate. Okay, let's be very clear about that. No pandemic, you'd never see those kids. They would never touch the ice. And, you know, there's some. I'm thinking if I've got some of the names on the list that fell in that category. I think Fleming was one. Hayes, Young from Lawrence. You had Lund. I mean, these are pretty good quality name hockey kids that are playing in the league. I just got to be very careful. I'm not trying to bash the league. I'm just giving you facts. Those kids would not be in the league if it wasn't for some masterful recruiting around the problem that we had last year, which was the pandemic. So, hey, good for the NCDC. They did something that other programs probably could have done too. So, anyway, let's see who else is on there. Rich says lots of snow up in Potsdam. Let's see what we got here. We've got Charles is on from Long Island. Good to see you, Charles. Pat from Munising, Michigan. For those that you don't know, that's right next to Christmas, Michigan. Christmas, Michigan might be a little bit more famous because it's got a bar that it's just a really cool little place. There's anything up there. Get a pasty, go up to Munising, and then you got to drive from there, go over to Houghton, go in and see the D rink, the D stadium. If you really got time, you know, anybody that's a hockey person should go up. There's a little town right above Houghton that is between the D arena and the rink right above them. These are two of the oldest rinks in North America. They're fantastic. You really get a good sense of hockey up in the area. If you really want to take the time, go up to Michigan Tech, which is right up the street from the D Stadium, and see the Michigan Tech rink right outside the door, like 20 feet outside the door. There's a whole cemetery, and if you look in the front row, you'll see my family up there. The reason I bring that up is because my kid's great 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 grandfather was one of the first pro coaches in hockey. Most people don't know this, but the pro hockey started in Houghton, Michigan. That's the home of professional hockey. That whole area up there is the professional hockey hotbed back in the day. That was all the logging communities, the iron communities, the miners, and they would actually pay hockey players to come in, build a team, and they had an industrial league, which was eventually turned into the IHL. And this is pre-NHL days. This is the first pro league before the NHL came into fruition. So maybe you picked up something new tonight. Hopefully you did. Mario's on from Montreal. Good to see you, Mario. Kyle on from Nebraska. Sean on from Des Moines. Man, we've got, thank you, James. James is on from Austin. Beautiful place to visit. What a great town Austin is. I love being down there. Greg's on. Amherstburg, Ontario. Okay, I know some of you this gets old, but I got to help people that are new. If you're in Detroit, hop on the bridge, drive across the bridge, turn right. You'll get to Amherstburg. You'll probably see you'll see Greg because Greg will tell you there's not that too many people on the road. Although there are a lot of, what is it in that area? Is it tomatoes? I think there's a lot of tomato. I know there's oil, wind farms. And I think there's a lot of tomatoes in that area too. So, man, we're never going to get through everybody. So I'm going to just leave it. I'm going to leave it at this, except for to say the best billet family in the world is on. Alana and James are on from Odessa. Good to see you guys on. And then Mark's on from New Hampshire. Let's see if we got some questions, and let's jump into some questions. Does that mean that most NCDC players are going D3 and ACHA? Do they have a lot of D3 commits? And the answer to that is yes. Okay, the vast majority of the league is a D3 league. We've got some friends on that if they're on, they'll come on and tell you a little bit more about the EHL, NA3HL, USPHL Premier, and the NCDC where they all fit in. Now, I don't want to try to mix a message here. The NAL has a certain percentage. And it's a lot higher than people think of players that end up playing D3 hockey. Now, the difference between, and this is most NCDC players fall in the same category with the NAL. If you're a NAL player and you're going to a D3 team, you've probably got a better pick of the top selection of schools, the powerhouse schools. If you're coming out of the Premier League or, the NA3HL or some of the other programs, you're probably not going to have the same selection that a kid out of the NAL is getting. But to get back to the original question is, yes, there are a ton of players, a substantial amount of players that come out of the NCDC, the vast majority of the players. As far as the ACHL or the ACHA College Club, it's harder to actually gauge that number because remember, there's 500 plus ACHA college programs out there. There's 3 divisions, Division 1, Division 2, and Division 3 on ACHA. I defer you, ask that question on our discussion group because there's probably 15 or 20 coaches, ACHA coaches on that group. And I'm sure that they'll jump in. Michael Hermbrot is our, whatever you call him, the guru or the expert on the discussion group. Great friend of mine. I played with him in the Marine Corps for the All-Marine hockey team. He is also an ACHA Division I coach. He can explain, what the percentage is. I think it's more regional. But I can't really answer that as well as other people can answer it. So good to see Dave on from Parker. Let's see what other questions. Bills just scored a TD. 29-26 Bills with 2 minutes to go for those of you that are interested in that. I got another question here. Let's pop this one up. So if a player is 17 or 18 and could play NCDC or N3HL, what do you think would be a better stepping stone to the NAL or to the USHL? That's a phenomenal question. Okay, Richard, that is a question that probably we should have let off with. So I'm a young kid and I've got a choice between the two leagues. There's pluses and minuses to both. If I go into a null program and it's a strong null program, obviously I've got direct connection right to the NAHL team. Okay, but there's another little piece that falls in the puzzle. The null allots draft picks and tenders to each null team specifically that have to be used and earmarked only for NA3HL players. So if there's a draft pick or a tender that has to be used and you're one of the better players, the odds of you getting tendered or getting drafted into the null go up exponentially compared to your peer group because you're already in the league. The league is mandated. So you know right away that and it could be one or two per team depending on the situation because there's some incentives for building and developing the league that go into those tenders. So absolutely, that's one of the reasons why you see that beginning of the year event, the NAPHL event, the U18 event, and the NA3 event early in the year, that is so heavily attended because it's heavily scouted by the NAHL because they're looking for those players that they want to use their tenders on. So yes, absolutely, that is one avenue. Now the other avenue is keep in mind that there is a certain percentage, and it's not a high percentage, but there's still going to be, and I can pull the number up as we speak, there's a certain amount of players that will play in the null that played in the NCDC the year before. So right now I'm struggling with doing a screen, sharing my screen, because I've got multiple screens, and what it does right now, if I pull up and try to share a screen with you, it's pulling all three screens up. So I got to get that fixed. But if I pull up the null right now and just look at the null in general as a league, and then I turned around and I asked the North American Hockey League, okay, go down and I pull up the whole roster. I think I've got a video out that shows you how to do this. If not, let me know if you're interested in this. Put in the comments and I'll make sure I put a video out for this. What I did was I took the whole null and I rostered every player that has been in the null this year. Then under the premier service of Elite Prospects, I can go up top and say has played NCDC. Okay, so now my search filter's got it built in to tell me how many players. So I'm going to leave goalies out for right now just because I don't want to try to add up different groups. There's been 930 kids that have played in the null this year. Okay. And of those 930, now this is just forwards, this is forward and D, this is not goalies. If I hit the search feature and I look at NCDC players that have more than 10 games. And the reason I want to say more than 10 games is because, some kids started off the beginning of the year, may have got a few games in. So it looks like the number of kids that played in the NCDC in prior years, probably 40, 50 good kids, maybe a little bit more. The list is probably 70 kids. So not quite 10%, but there's a substantial amount of kids. And usually these are kids that have 1 or 2 years of juniors. Now, from a director of player operations, and I'm looking to develop players, will I suggest that we bring in a player that's in his last year from the NCDC? Absolutely. If we need a veteran player and we need a player that's game ready, maybe there's a kid from the NCDC that would fit for us next year. In most situations, you want a kid with 2 years, possibly 3 years left. So they do come over. And I hope that helped a little bit. That's a great question. Tender draft on one side of it, and I already having a relationship that potentially get into practices, especially in some of the cities that have their NA3 team in the same vicinity or actually the same rink as the NA team, potentially practicing, working out with the team, potentially getting into games, and just getting to be there through main camps, be there through the whole process. It does work. Teams always bring kids up. The question is what is the percentage that actually make it? The percentage that make it from the NAPHL and the NA3HL is still low. It's probably very similar to the same percentage Well, I can do the same thing. So 60, 70 kids, I thought was the number on the NCDC. If we just throw in NA3 and see how many kids have NA3HL, I would imagine it's going to be higher, but we're live. I have nothing to hide. I'll give you whatever number pops up here. So let's sort it by games played. I don't want the kids with just 1 or 2 games. I want kids that are actually playing. And almost 60, 70 kids, right in the same range. That's without goalies again. So the number is going to be roughly the same. So 2 different leagues, 2 different ways to go about it. Now, playing in the USPHL Premier is probably your destination. Is coming out of that league. The step ups from that league could potentially be none, because there are some good teams in that league, just like there's great teams in the NCDC too. But the step up from the Premier League could possibly be to one of the lower level Canadian junior hockey leagues, which when I say lower level, that it could be a lower level team in a good league. It could be an AJ team that's on the bottom. But you're probably not going to see an NA pickup from the Premier League. That doesn't happen very often. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Let's see what else we got as far as questions. Are the USHL and NAHL combines worth going to? So we did a lot of this last week, Charles, on this, and the answer to that is yes, to an extent. First of all, my opinion is, for a young player, anytime you can go to a combine, you're getting experience of being around. You're getting your name out there. You're getting experience skating with some guys that are going to be playing in the higher levels, even if you're not ready for it, or even if you are, you can get exposure. I know that the vast majority of North American Hockey League teams take combines extremely serious. Doesn't mean every team does, but the vast majority of them, it's part of the professionalism. I know that we have 2 team combines, and then we have a couple league combines. We'll have exposure, meaning scouts at all those events, and possibly even coaches at some of the events too, because we know that there's going to be players there that will end up in our main camp, and almost inevitably those players are making it into our roster. Every year there's 1 or 2 players that come out of the combines that make the roster for the team I'm working on, and that's usually the case across the board. Now, the USHL event used to be different. It used to be, hey, we're just kind of showing you what we do in the USHL, and the player level was low. They'd have a third of the players that were elite, U16, U18 players, U16, U15, U16 players. And then they had, kids that were just calling up and saying, we want to skate. And there was no real depth in the player pool. And they did a good job of covering the whole nation, but they didn't do a good job of getting the best teams in. So you might get kids in there from Detroit, but have no exposure for the kids coming out of Boston. And it's like, well, you're missing, a third of your market, or no kids out of the New York market. I'm just, the best players. So it's better now. And the USHL used to do a very poor job of keeping a lot of bodies in the stands with clipboards. And that's gotten a lot better over the years too. I remember, my son 6 years ago, skating in that event. In the last 2 or 3 games, after the first day, we didn't see any of the young assistant coaches. They're out doing whatever they do. And if you're in the industry and you know what it's like, where you get together with all your buddies and your coaches, you can kind of figure out what was going on. But it's much, much better now. Not the same anymore. Any other questions dealing with this? I think I've got the gist of I skipped a few because I want to try to stay on topic. Did not want to stay on too long tonight. We've already gone 40 minutes. Any other issues you guys want to talk about, or any other questions want to pop up real quick? If not, let's call it a night. I hope you got some information out of this. Remember, it's a good league. There's nothing wrong with the league. Oh, let me explain one thing though, because this is an important part of it. League of opportunity and advancement versus league of destination. The whole design of the NCDC is to be a league of destination. When you talk about, players moving on, they're not encouraged to move on out of the NCDC. The NCDC wants to be the final stop for their players. They want to have players age out from them. Premier is built to feed into the NCDC. U16 and U18 USPHL teams are built to feed into the top. Okay, and that's, I mean, pretty much that works everywhere that way. However, the NAL and the BCHL are different leagues. The BCHL wants to be a league of destination. The NAL loses. I mean, you look at the USPHL rosters. 20% of the rosters played in the NAL. So the NAL knows its place as far as, hey, if a guy's ready to move up to the USHL, he's going to the USHL. Nothing we're going to do about it. And they build good relationships with them. They, most of the teams communicate frequently with the USHL teams from the NAL level, and there's a great working relationship there. That working relationship doesn't go back and forth. Now, personality-wise, there might be a couple guys that know each other and talk NCDC to the NAL, but officially, those leagues don't work together, and they don't try to help advanced players. So when you get into the NCDC, you're not going to have the coach going, you know what, you do a really good job here for 1 year. We'll get you out of that NAL team where your odds just increased by 4 times that you'll get a NCAA Division I commitment. Won't happen. It won't happen. Okay, now there'll be a few coaches that realize they're not going to be able to keep a kid back, and he's a one and done for them. But the majority, the push is going to be, you got everything here, free hockey. You're right in the middle of the hockey hotbed as far as D1 and D3 hockey. Why would you want to go anywhere else? There's some truth to that, but just know that other leagues work together. In our leagues of advancement, the USHL is not a league of advancement because they're on the top of the heap. They're number one of the pinnacle. So the question just came up about what's the attitude with the USHL. The attitude with the USHL is they're the top dog. They need to be the league of destination. I mean, they are literally one of the best, if not the best right now, for number one draft picks in any of the leagues. They do a phenomenal job of that. And we'll do a whole discussion about how that's evolved over the years and how the national training program fits into that. So I wanted to finish with that. League of advancement, league of destination. In my eyes, you always want to be with a team that wants to work on getting you to the highest level and competitive level you can play at. So hope that helps, folks. Once again, my name is Jeff, Junior Hockey Advisor. You can go onto our discussion group and please, please, please like and comment on our Facebook page and our YouTube page. It would be a big, big help if you like this information. If you jump over to YouTube, maybe click on a video or two and then like and subscribe. I sure would appreciate it. Have a great night. Thanks. We'll see you next week.